Erin Paterson, The Mushroom Murderer, Part 4. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. We continue our examination of Erin Paterson, who was recently convicted of the murder of 3 people and the attempted murder of a 4th, to make a determination as to what she is. Before I launch into the next examination of an aspect of her life, I would also welcome those of you who are paying attention to this series, that if you might share it in forums, that this case has been discussed, as undoubtedly there are many people, particularly in Australia, but more widely, who know about the case, who may well be interested in learning more about what Patterson actually is as a consequence of this detailed analysis. And therefore, if you know of places where she's been discussed, fora that have debated her innocence, her guilt, what's driven her, what was behind her actions, indeed, perhaps even asking, what is she? Then I would encourage you to direct people to this. There are a lot more of you than there are of me, and by you sharing and directing people to this work, it spreads knowledge of it naturally and allows people to gain a greater understanding, not only of the personality of Erin Paterson, but also of my work more widely. My thanks in advance. We're now going to look, as we always do with a subject under the Tudor scope, at intimate relationships. Now, interestingly, because with Erin Paterson, prior to her infamy, she was not somebody that people had heard of. And therefore, her previous relationships aren't documented. It's either the case that she hasn't had any, which is a possibility, or that they were not worth reporting on and were minimal in duration, or it's quite simply there just isn't information that exists about them and we're kept in the dark. This means that we can't garner any understanding about her behaviour from intimate relationships other than her marriage to Simon Patterson. Therefore, we don't see, for instance, a string of intimate partners. We don't have repeated allegations of abusive behaviours in previous relationships. We don't have any evidence to demonstrate the segueing from one relationship into another and the potential overlap. The absence of this information might support that Patterson perhaps might not be a narcissist, given the lack of prominent intimate relationships. After all, it's usually the case that narcissists, even ones that are of a cerebral and victim persuasion, will often have a number of different relationships because of their inability to maintain them, for reasons I've explained it separately, and the fact that their narcissism causes them to seek out fresh relationships. However, we can't put too much weight on the absence of that information pointing to her not being a narcissist, because it might simply be the case that she's had these relationships, but nobody really knew about them and they've not been reported on. And instead, what we need to do is examine in detail her relationship with Simon Patterson. Apparently, they met as part of a fairly electric group of friends, which is how Simon described them in court testimony. They had a friendship which then developed into a romantic relationship. Simon noted Erin's intelligence, wit, and humour as qualities that attracted him to her. The relationship to begin with was described as positive, characterised by mutual attraction and shared social connections. He described her as very intelligent, witty, and quite funny. They married in 2007 in Simon's hometown of Corumburra, at the home of Simon's parents, Don and Gail Patterson. The wedding was attended by family, with Heather and Ian Wilkinson's son, David, walking Erin down the aisle. Erin's parents did not attend, as she stated they were travelling across Russia. Now, pausing there, ordinarily, you would expect that your family and friends would attend your wedding because it's one of those major lifetime events. And that even if your family were travelling elsewhere, that they would make the effort to come back because, after all, this is your daughter's wedding. And therefore, the fact that they didn't return might tell us something about the state of the relationship between Erin Paterson and her parents. Remember, she did describe it as a cold relationship, and perhaps this is borne out by their failure to attend her wedding. Or there might be an alternative reason as to why they didn't attend, and Erin Paterson utilised an excuse of them travelling to explain why they were not in attendance, because, of course, people would ask, where are your mother and father? We have to consider that Erin Paterson might well have made this up as an excuse because, as you've heard and you will hear, she has a propensity for lying. The couple had 2 children, a son in 2009 and a daughter in 2014. After the birth of their son in 2009, the couple began experiencing difficulties. Erin Paterson testified that they struggled with communication when disagreements arose, which strained their relationship. Now, the fact that they have some difficulties, well, certain relationships don't have any at all. They're particularly healthy, and there are appropriate discussions, which aren't arguments, which aren't huge disagreements. There are other individuals where, in their relationship, there are disagreements, but that doesn't mean that there's a narcissist at play. Interestingly, they separated multiple times during this period, with a final separation in 2015. These multiple separations might have been representative of the fact that abusive behaviours were taking place, with one party either disengaging from the other or escaping and then being drawn back in. Patterson claimed that it was an inability to communicate effectively during disagreements, which does seem a rather strange basis for then leading to separation. They separated formally in 2015, though they continued to co-parent their 2 children and maintained a friendly relationship, at least initially. They communicated regularly via the Signal messaging app and cooperated on parenting. Interestingly, Simon Patterson expressed hope for reconciliation during this period, which tended to suggest that it was Erin Paterson that was causing the breakups or deciding on the breakups. Might this be because he was offending her need for control and that's how she dealt with it, by way of disengaging from him? In his testimony, he maintained that they remained friendly during separation and he hoped that they would reunite someday. Erin Paterson's perspective was less detailed. She simply acknowledged the separation and ongoing co-parenting. Between 2021 and 2022, Simon Patterson experienced 3 separate incidents of serious illness, which police later alleged were attempts by Erin Paterson to murder him. These charges were dropped before the trial in April 2025. One notable incident in May 2022 involved Simon collapsing at home and spending 21 days in intensive care, including 16 days in an induced coma, and undergoing multiple emergency operations on his small intestine. A source close to Simon claimed he suspected that Erin had tried to poison him with an ingested toxin during these incidents, often coinciding with times he spent with her. The relationship at this juncture had become increasingly strained, with growing tensions over financial and co-parenting issues. Given the fact that Erin Paterson has been convicted of poisoning 4 people, it is not a great leap of the evidence to believe that Simon Patterson's 3 separate incidents of serious illness, one whereby he was admitted to hospital and spent 21 days in intensive care, are indeed the actions of somebody seeking to poison, and such activity would demonstrate naturally an absence of emotional empathy for that person. The fact that it has happened 3 occasions doesn't support it being an error or a mistake, but rather a deliberate act designed to murder him, albeit it failed. It may well be the case that if the relationship had become increasingly strained by this point with growing tensions over financial and co-parenting issues, that this amounted to a threat to control to Erin Paterson, causing her to seek to nullify that threat to control by taking the drastic step of seeking to poison her ex-husband. Patterson denied any wrongdoing related to these incidents, and the charges were not pursued at trial. We know that they happened, there is evidence to support that this occurred, and again, given the fact that she has poisoned and been convicted of poisoning 4 people, it would seem rather strange if Simon Patterson fell ill for a reason which was not associated with poisoning or Erin Paterson. Police initially charged Erin Paterson with 3 counts of attempted murder of Simon Patterson related to these incidents, alleging that she poisoned him. He believed that she tried to poison him in 2022, leaving him fighting for his life. The charges were dropped on the eve of the trial in April 2025, presumably as a consequence of the fact that it was felt that it would just be adding to an existing case and that nothing additional would be necessarily gained, and potentially concerns about the evidence. By late 2022, the relationship had become more contentious owing to financial disputes, particularly after Simon listed himself as separated on his tax return, which affected family tax benefits. Erin applied for child support, which was assessed at $38 per month, a figure Simon acknowledged was significantly less than previous expenses he covered, such as school fees. This may well, of course, then amounted to a potential loss of residual benefit and a threat to control. Erin also expressed frustration with Simon and his parents, calling Simon a deadbeat, insult, and his family a lost cause, smearing, in messages to friends. She also sent extremely aggressive and inflammatory messages to Simon's parents, Don and Gail, about their reluctance to mediate the dispute. Such behaviour suggests that this exhibits a necessity to assert control over people, that she needed to influence them, and she did so in an aggressive manner, perhaps the manifestation of heated, ignited fury. If she has a dispute in relation to her husband, why does she need to involve his parents? Perhaps it's because she felt that they could help her and that she wanted the relationship to succeed. But that doesn't really sit with the evidence, does it? Because it was always Simon saying that he wanted them to reconcile, and it would appear that she was the one that kept causing the relationship to end. Simon Patterson testified that Erin Paterson became extremely aggressive over the child support issue. She wrote in a group chat, "His mum was horrified I claimed child support. Why isn't she horrified her son is such a deadbeat that I had no choice but to claim?" She also expressed to friends, "I don't need anything from any of these people." And she described his family as a lost cause. By July 2023, the relationship was particularly strained, with Simon declining invitation to a lunch Erin hosted on the 29th of July 2023, citing discomfort amid their tensions. I suspect, in other words, he thought, "There's no way I'm going to eat anything that she prepares because I think she's tried to poison me 3 times. Erin texted Simon that she was disappointed as she had put effort into preparing a special meal and emphasised the importance of his attendance. Was this the natural disappointment of someone who has put work in, or is this the entitled response of a narcissist who has their need for control threatened by the failure to attend, which causes wounding, and because she had another motive, namely, she wanted to off her husband, having tried 3 times previously? She texted him, "That's really disappointing. I've spent many hours this week preparing lunch for tomorrow. It's important for me that you're all there. I hope you change your mind." It's been suggested that Patterson harboured a simmering rage towards Simon and his family. This might be the manifestation of heated, ignited fury. It doesn't appear that she had any other romantic relationships other than her marriage to Simon. Her personal life has been described as privileged but private, with no indication of other partners before or after Simon. This might be because she is particularly private, or it might be because they simply do not exist. It would appear that whilst the relationship began in a mutually beneficial fashion, that after a while the relationship became strained, and it would appear that Erin Paterson was the one who grew dissatisfied. We don't have any evidence of repeated abuse other than, of course, the very serious allegation that after the relationship ended, she sought to poison Simon Patterson, trying 3 times and conceivably a 4th at the fatal meal where 3 people died, albeit he didn't attend. Her only documented romantic relationship is with Simon Patterson. They met prior to 2007. There was their final separation in 2015, and it was clear that thereafter there were significant post-separation tensions, culminating in the actions of 2022 and 2023. The relationship evolved from what appeared to be a positive and affectionate connection to a strained and contentious one, which sounds similar to the narcissistic dynamic by which you're familiar with, and it was marked by financial disputes, co-parenting issues, and allegations of attempted murder. Initially, Erin Paterson was described as intelligent and witty, but later described as aggressive, and that may well have been the manifestation of heated, ignited fury. More indicators that arise out of the one main relationship that she had. Next, we're going to look at her work relationships. Join me in part 5.